So I think it's interesting because you have Aubrey Miller, that's out there. You didn't pick him. And of course, Deion Sanders was his coach. I don't really like talking about Deion Sanders as much. He's moved on. I've moved on. We all have to honestly move on, but he's tough. And this could be like another Deion Sanders pick. You had James Houston. Now you got Aubrey Miller. You have Dejon Nugget Warren that's out there, Isaiah Bolden. So do you think the Deion Sanders effect is going to really take hold this year? Because I personally didn't see it last year. We had 4 players drafted, none in 2021, but there's been multiple players drafted to the NFL from HBCUs before Deion Sanders even knew what HBCUs were. So do you think that maybe this is the year we'll maybe see the prospects from Jackson State that he coached get drafted, or does the Deion Sanders effect even really exist?
When I think of the Deion Sanders effect, I think of the Deion Sanders effect in coaching, not necessarily players. And we had this discussion before. Was he a great player, one of the greatest players of all time? Is he a good inspirational coach? Cool. But when it comes to the development of the players outside the character, but when it comes to skill, I think that was more of a whole staff thing. Deion Sanders just knows how to pick them. That's all I'm really going to say. I'm not going to go into his coaching or whatever. I just don't think his effect really applies to players. I really just think it applies to getting HBCUs the notoriety, not necessarily skill. But if he does get another defensive lineman into this draft, this would be his second one in a row after James Houston, which, would come to his credibility that he knows how to put players and put products into the NFL. He was third on my list. I just don't think he's going to be the first. I just don't think he's going to be the first Jackson State player to be taken off. Honestly, there's too many good players, especially on the defense side. A lot of edge rushers, a lot of defensive linemen coming off the board that I just feel like personally are better than Aubrey Miller. He's top 5 for me to be taken off, but I don't think he's going to be the first. Like Dallas Daniels, I think should be taken off the board first. This man put in work this year and was the most used wide receiver out of Shedeur Sanders when they were there that put points on the board, averaging about 3 touchdowns a game. I would pick him, to be honest, over Aubrey Miller. And then you got to talk about Isaiah Bolden. Then you got Warren that's also entered the draft. And then when you look at Central too, you got Tyler Barnes, you got Robert Mitchell, who I think is a better player and probably a better pick than Aubrey Miller. He's a great guy, show great numbers. But if you weren't invited, you're not one of those 2 players that were invited. And then you got other players that I just named that are just a little bit more developed than he is. Not saying he won't be taken. He's a big name, but not one of the biggest names that I've seen.
You said Dallas Daniels. So do you think that maybe it's a Shedeur Sanders effect? Because you have Shedeur, that's the HBCU player of the year. And he was putting up a lot of big numbers, a lot of flashy games. He had that FAMU game where he threw all those consecutive passes. And Dallas Daniels and Shane Hooks were the big recipients. And then, of course, for Nugget, when you really look at Nugget, he had Travis Hunter to deal with. Nugget is a talented player, but Travis Hunter really took up a lot of oxygen. Now, Travis did get injured, but I think that sort of took some shine from Nugget. So, do you think that more than the defensive players, they were the number 1 defense in FCS, do you think that maybe Shedeur can will Dallas Daniels into the NFL?
I think that combo, how special they were, I think that's probably one of the main reasons that he gets noticed. Not saying Coach Prime didn't do anything, but just having very great molded quarterback. When you look at his highlight tape and then you look at how well he did in the Legacy Bowl and how well he did on those days, like I said, I think just Daniels is a better pick to me than Aubrey Miller, especially when you're looking at teams that are trying to rebuild, like Bears, and you have the Packers, and then you got the Patriots, you got the Saints coming up, you have the Panthers, you got the Raiders, all these teams that are trying to rebuild and pick up weapons. I think it's more of a weapons year than anything. Now is the time to build up your offensive line and make sure that you can get down the field and score. So I'm with Dallas Daniels on this one. Aubrey Miller is great. There's nothing against him. I just personally think with the way that Jackson State shined, especially with Shedeur Sanders on the offense, Dallas Daniels comes off the board first.
I want to pencil in this question for next year because we're going to be here next year. Should we claim Shedeur Sanders as an HBCU player if he gets drafted? That's going to be, we don't got to answer that right now. We got to think about that one like that. We're going to put that on the ticket for next year's draft show because we might have to have that conversation because I might be like Jackson State Shedeur Sanders, Colorado, Jackson State Shedeur Sanders.
Like what you hear?
Yeah.
Subscribe to HBCU Pulse Radio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, head to HBCUPulse.com to stay up to date on what's going on in the HBCU community. Thank you for listening to HBCU Pulse Radio.